Howdy, folks. Welcome to Storytime. I'm Murph. In this edition of Storytime, we will be listening to Episode 6 of The Lands, which is Part 6 of Chapter 1, Something is Happening. Let's go over a little bit what's happened previously in The Lands. We know that Gonzo sent Grimmer to the kingdom to retrieve Sheriff Bob from Rosie's Tavern so he could talk to him about passing a law that the tribe can only sell their goods in Gonzo's stores. And he was pretty persuasive in getting the sheriff to do that. But before leaving, Sheriff Bob reminded Gonzo that Maddog is still out there. He hasn't got him yet. And he is as free can be, which pissed Gonzo off a little bit. Director Jakalian was shocked to hear that the professor left Techland. So he ordered a search of Techland, but we know that the professor got away with the help of a little group. What happened to that little group? Possibly they were captured when Techland got Princess Natalie and her entourage into neutral lands. Was that little group? And where is the professor? I'm sure we'll find out soon enough. Maddog is still at River's Edge Terrace playing Hold'em, but now he's got a young man playing with him who idolizes him and the Gang of Five. Will that make Maddog uncomfortable? Will it cause him to mess up? Or does he even care? Captain Hobogon has decided to move the young man that they found out in Hubland to Queen Kwan's store, which is in Merchant Valley. He hopes that his investigatory training can help him in finding out who the young man is and why and how that lush green grass has grown at the base of the statue in Hubland. And finally, King Michael has gone to bed with his queen, lovely Michelle, still uneasy about the things that have been happening in the kingdom. He's not sure what it is, but he feels that something is happening. Well, shall we find out what that might be? Yeah, let's do it. Just remember that after the credits run, to stick around for a little more information about Episode 6. In the meantime, a 1 and a 2, and away we go. Hello, and welcome to The Lands. Episode 6, Chapter 1, Something is Happening, Part 6. This episode's quote, "What have you ancient ones done now?" Captain Hobogon. King Michael slept next to his lovely wife in an absolutely huge bed. It could probably sleep 4 adults, but the two of them slept close to each other. On the nightstand next to the king, a cat appeared out of thin air. He was a large orange cat with black stripes and with very interesting green eyes. He tiptoed on the pillows to King Michael's head, lightly tapped King Michael on his head with his paw. King Michael woke up and turned his head towards the cat. Without hesitation, he separated himself from his queen and quietly left the bed. He exited out of the room from a side door, followed by the cat. The door led to a short hallway which led into another room, which was the king's study. The cat followed him into the room. King Michael closed the door, looked down at the cat, and said quietly but sternly, "This better be important, cat." "It is, your highness," answered the cat, bowing before him. "What is it?" the impatient king asked. "Your highness, there has been incidents." The cat jumped up onto the table. The king followed him and sat down in a chair. "Okay, cat, you have my attention." "There was activity in the neutral lands which was outside the ordinary," Cat said. "First, flares were seen in the air above Hubland." "Flares?" the king asked. "Yes. First there was a red flare, then a blue flare." That's an all-call. There must have been some sort of a medical emergency. Any idea what it was?" "No, your highness." "Cat, contact Captain Hobogon and find out what that incident was all about. Hopefully it's not too serious. I hope that's not why you woke me up.
No, sir. There was another incident, sir. It looks like It looks as though a small contingent was attacked and captured by a small army from Techland.
What? An army from Techland in the neutral lands? Well, where was Captain Hobogon?
Cat sat down next to the king's arm. He was in Hubland after the flares were seen, but for some reason moved into Merchant Valley. Your Highness, the small contingent that was attacked, it looked like it may have been Princess Natalie.
What?
King Michael jumped out of the chair. He put his hand over his head and took a deep breath. He had to keep it down so as not to alarm anyone. He walked away from the table, obviously upset by the news.
Where was Captain Hobogon?
He turned around and pointed at Cat.
Cat, I want a full analysis of the situation, complete with all data received and reviews of breakdowns in the system. This is terrible.
He came back to the chair and sat down. He leaned over to Cat. What of the other situation? Cat leaned into the king. Not good. King Michael closed his eyes. What exactly does not good mean? The professor made it safely out of Techland. The exchange was made, but... Cat stood up and circled around a couple times. He never made it to our cutoff. King Michael stood up again, his face turning red. He wanted to scream. Cat stood on the table, just watching the king. King Michael hardly ever lost his temper. He was always calm, analytical, and brainy. When he was upset, he would usually bark orders and want reports. Right now, he looked like he could throw a cat against the wall. Cat backed up a little on the table. King Michael took a couple of deep breaths, trying desperately to calm down.
Did he make it to the town?
We do not think so. We think there must have been a diversion of some kind. King Michael glanced at Cat.
A diversion? Like he decided to go somewhere else? Could he be hiding somewhere here in the kingdom?
Cat looked up, processing the question.
It is possible.
But he didn't make it to the town.
We are pretty sure he did not.
Very good, very good. With the town talking secession, we cannot afford them getting their hands on the professor. King Michael put a hand to his receding hairline. Cat stood ready to receive his orders. Any time King Michael put his hand to his forehead, it meant he was considering what he wanted done.
Right now, bottom line is we need to find the professor. Have a team search the kingdom, but keep it quiet.
Yes, sir, answered Cat. I requested data from the attack in the neutral lands, which I expect this morning. Yes, sir, answered Cat. I want to know who was in that party that met the professor. Yes, sir, answered Cat. We may have to think outside the box on this one, Cat. Cat rolled his eyes because that was one of King Michael's favorite phrases. He had a few of them.
If the professor is hiding in the kingdom, we have the advantage.
He looked over to Cat and nodded. Cat nodded back. Then Cat disappeared. King Michael opened the door, waited a moment, then closed it. He walked over to the window. It looked out into the neutral lands. All right, Director Jakalian, what are you up to? Director Jakalian stood on the balcony of the carousel building, puffing his cigar.
Stinking professor.
Director Jakalian cursed as he went back inside his office. Standing there at attention was Commander Kerr. Director Jakalian walked by her and sat at his desk.
So, Commander Kerr, who exactly was in that caravan again?
Princess Natalie of the Western Territories tribe and her entourage, sir, she answered.
And what have we done with them?
They are in confinement.
All right, Chief, relax, Director Jakalian said.
Commander Kerr then did just that. She went to a chair in front of his desk and sat down.
Kerr, what are we going to do?
Unsure, sir, was her response. He got up from his chair.
Stinking Agent Clayton is going to have a field day with this. How could the professor just escape?
There was only silence. Director Jakalian took another puff of his cigar. He looked out the window. He could see it, his baby all lit up and ready to go. He looked at it and released a big sigh. Oh, you've got to get that baby working. The Orbitron will be the most powerful weapon, he muttered. Director Jakalian, what would you like me to do about the prisoners? No, they're not prisoners, Director Jakalian responded, throwing his hands up in the air. He turned to Commander Kerr. They are potential witnesses, and we need to know what they know. He took another puff of his cigar. I might regret this later, but have Agent Clayton and his team talk to them. See what they can find out. Commander Kerr stood up and answered. Yes, sir. And Kerr, keep me updated on everything. And I mean everything, especially about the new project. He took another puff. With the professor missing, that might be our only weapon. Yes, sir. She bowed to him and started to leave. Commander Kerr, the director called out. She stopped and turned. Check every nook and cranny of Techland. I want to be sure that the professor isn't hiding here before I do anything. Yes, sir, she answered and left. Director Jakalian went back out to the balcony. He looked over to his massive weapon, the Orbitron, and sighed. He then looked out towards the horizon. Even though it was dark, he could see the big white mountain. He smiled and put his cigar in his mouth. Standing on top of the big white mountain were some of Director Jakalian's men, keeping a watchful eye of the surrounding lands. A bug was flying around one of the guards, so he swatted at it but missed. It continued to fly around him, and he kept swatting at it. He accidentally bumped into one of the other guards. What are you doing? The guard asked, pushing him away. This bug won't stop bothering me, the other guard said. The angry guard looked at the bug. That's because it's not a bug, it's a fairy. Just then the bug lit up and laughed as she flew away. The guard drew his gun and aimed at it. Lousy fairy, he said as his partner grabbed the gun and lowered it. Let it go. You would never hit it in a million years. The bright, sparkling light flew over the top of the big white mountain a couple of more times, laughing. Then it continued on its way, passing over the dry desert terrain known as the Neutral Lands. It moved quickly, bobbing up and down, moving with excitement. It headed towards the castle of the kingdom. The castle was beautiful and huge. Bright lights shone on it, making its pastel colors gleam in the darkness. The bright, sparkling light dove down and skimmed on the water that surrounded the castle, causing a fish to jump out of the water to try to catch it. It didn't. The bright, sparkling light zipped up the front of the castle, past the drawbridge, through the window and into King Michael's and Queen Michelle's bedroom. It circled around the giant bed, which at this time only had Queen Michelle in it. The bright, sparkling light was making quite a racket and a high-pitched jingling noise. The noise finally caused Queen Michelle to stir from her sleep. She looked around and saw the light floating above the bed. Still groggy from sleep, she addressed the light. Belle, what is it? The light, which turned out to be a fairy named Belle, was very excited about something. Whatever she said got Queen Michelle to wake up. Really? Right out there in the Neutral Lands? Do we know who it was? From the tribe, eh? Oh, what do you think they were doing there? Wow, I missed all the excitement. See what you can find out. She looked around the room. Do you know where my husband is? Yeah, you're right. He's probably with Cat. I hate Cat. I sometimes feel like Michael pays more attention to Cat than me. I agree. It would be better if he were gone. Suddenly Queen Michelle froze. She whispered real low. Did you sweep the room? The fairy froze as well. She shook her head no. Then she started flying around the room, dropping what looked like sparkling dust everywhere. Both she and Queen Michelle surveyed the room. I don't see him. We have to remember to do that every time before we talk. You never know when that creepy cat is just hanging around invisible. Belle agreed. Okay, well, you go and see what you can find out, and I will see you in the morning. Belle flew around the room one more time, then flew out the window. Queen Michelle did one more survey of the area as Belle's dust fell. No cat. She let out a sigh of relief and lay back down in bed. Belle flew around outside the window for a moment, then flew past the window in which Prince Sean was asleep. She stopped at the window, then flew off towards Techland. Prince Sean lay sleeping, his long blonde hair covering his face. Cat appeared out of nowhere and was sitting above his head. He gently moved the hair away from his face using his claws. The challenge was to do it without waking him and without scratching him. After he got most of it moved, he waved his tail just below the prince's nose. Cat had to hold in a laugh as the prince twitched his nose. Cat did it again, this time making his tail go up the bridge of his nose to his forehead and swirled it around. The prince brought his hand up to his face and rubbed it. Cat just did get his tail out of the way. But he was so focused on moving his tail that he didn't see the prince open one of his eyes. It closed quickly before Cat could see. Cat positioned himself again, ready to do another go-over with his tail, when suddenly the prince flew the bed cover over Cat. Cat immediately went invisible, but you could still see where he was under the covers. He scrambled to get out from under it. The prince lifted the covers, causing Cat to go flying. He did so with a little bit of a cat scream. Prince Sean let out a laugh. "Ha!" he exclaimed, pointing at where he thought Cat landed. "I got you this time." Cat reappeared on all fours, a bit stunned. He let out a nervous laugh. Yes, this time you did get me." He didn't care much for the fact that Prince Sean did surprise him, but he had to accept the fact that he did. "I guess once in 100 times isn't bad." "Cat, what are you doing here? Why the wake-up call?" Prince Sean sat up in bed. "You need to get a team assembled, Prince Sean. Your father needs you to search the kingdom for someone." Prince Sean let out a moan. "Oh, what happened? One of the dwarves go crazy and run away?" "No, it's much worse than that." "I find that hard to believe," Prince Sean responded. "Prince Sean, need I remind you that you are the heir to the kingdom, and you need to start acting like a leader, not a whiner." "Sure, heir to the kingdom, if my sister doesn't come back." The prince lay back down and pulled the covers over his head. "Sean," Cat jumped up on the bed and stood next to his head. "I want you to listen to me. Please take the covers off your head." Prince Sean did so. "You, my lord, are a good leader." Cat jumped on his chest and looked right into his face. "Just because you are only 14, that does not mean you are not a leader. When you accept your duties and your role, you are king material. Men will follow you to their deaths. I promise you that. But you have got to stop worrying about your future. Whether you are king or not, people will follow you. Prince Sean, right now you are a good leader, but someday you will be great. And I mean that with everything that I am." Prince Sean stared into those crazy eyes of Cat. He knew that Cat really felt that way, but it was so hard for him to accept. "I know. Thanks, Cat. It's just that you are young, and you worry too much about your future. Even if your sister does come back, you will be a fantastic leader of her army." Prince Sean went to pet Cat. "Don't pet me," he snapped. "You know that I hate it." "I'm sorry," Prince Sean said with a chuckle. "I forget. Now, what is it I need to do?" "You need to get up." Cat jumped off the bed. "And assemble a team. We have some searching to do." "What? Now?" Prince Sean said as he sat up and swung his legs over the bed. "Yes, now," Cat replied as he jumped over to the windowsill and stared out the window. It was still dark, so the buildings and trees were lit up with tiny lights, some of them twinkling, as was customary in the kingdom. "You must always be ready to do the king's bidding, young prince, just as you will expect others to do for you someday." Cat sat on the window ledge, staring out at the kingdom as Prince Sean got ready. As a 14-year-old, Prince Sean could be full of energy, just never when you wanted him to be. Right now he was dragging. "What has your father, the king, told you about Techland, Prince Sean?" Prince Sean looked over at Cat. He sat in the window like he had so many times before, staring out into the kingdom, his tail swinging back and forth. "Well, he hates him, that's for sure. I mean, he hasn't come right out and said that because he would never say he hated anyone, but I know he does. Your father, the king, has many great qualities." Cat turned his head and looked at Prince Sean. "You could benefit from learning a few of them." Prince Sean smiled. It was just like Cat to point out the good qualities of his father. I'm not sure if my father could do it if it weren't for you and General Nails. Do not underestimate your father, Prince Sean. He is very wise. If General Nails and I were not around, he would find 2 others just as good. And he must. He is responsible for keeping the kingdom from falling into the hands of some very evil people. Prince Sean came up behind Cat, wanted to pet him, but Cat stopped him. Don't pet me. I'm sorry. You're like the only cat in the kingdom that doesn't like to be pet. That is because I am not your ordinary cat. Let's go. He jumped down and headed towards the door. That's the truth, Prince Sean said as he followed him. Grimmer hated to see his boss this way. Mad Dog was Gonzo's Moby Dick. He was the thorn in his paw. Sometime soon he was going to have to take care of business. He just knew it. He left the room with Gonzo still staring out the window. Gonzo continued to stare off into the distance. He was thinking of Mad Dog. "Charlie, we had him!" he yelled, smacking his cane on the floor. He spun his cane, which caused the large crystal on the top of it to reflect light around the room. He stared at the large crystal and his mind drifted back to that day when he had Mad Dog. Everything was perfect. The only thing missing was the Grim Reaper. He had gone with the sheriff to the monthly meeting of the lands. If only he had been there with him that night, instead of with the sheriff. Gonzo smacked his cane on the floor as he thought back to that night. They were all standing on the top floor of the steamboat, looking down at the paddle wheel. It was dark, but the lights from the boat allowed them to see Mad Dog, who was all tied up on one of the paddles, facing out to them. The steamboat's paddle wheel was huge. It had to be in order to propel the big boat up and down the river. The boat sat motionless right now. The paddle wheel was still. Tied to the closest paddle to the top level was Mad Dog. He looked very confused and annoyed. "Come on, Gonzo!" Mad Dog yelled. "If I knew where your treasure was, I would tell you. But I don't. I'm telling you, Gonzo, I didn't take it." "Chale!" responded Gonzo. "Don't give me that. I know you have it. This is your last chance, Mad Dog. Tell me where it is." "I told you I don't know," he yelled. Then under his breath he muttered something. "What was that?" Gonzo asked, knowing he had said something under his breath. "I don't know where it is," Mad Dog yelled. He then muttered something again. Gonzo had had enough. He raised his cane in the air and swirled it around. The crystal at the top of his cane reflected the light and lit up. This signaled to one of his cronies in the wheelhouse to start the paddle wheel, which he did. The paddle wheel started moving. Mad Dog, realizing he was in big trouble, started yelling. "Come on, Gonzo! What the heck are you doing?" He looked down at the water as it approached him. Gonzo lost sight of him, but heard him yell a quick "Whoa!" as the water hit him, and he went under. Gonzo shoved his cane in the air, and the paddle wheel came to a slow halt. It stopped just as Mad Dog got to the top once again. "Well, that was fun," Mad Dog said sarcastically. "I'm glad you enjoyed it, because we have a long ways to go to port, so you may be going a long time. So, you want to tell me where my treasure is?" "Gonzo, I'm telling you, I do not..." But Mad Dog didn't even finish when Gonzo swirled his cane again and the paddle wheel started moving. "Gonzo, don't do it!" "Enjoy the ride," Gonzo called down to him. "Remember to keep your hands and arms inside," he said, laughing. He watched as Mad Dog disappeared, this time a little faster. His crony in the wheelhouse had opened the engine up a little more, so the steamboat was going a little faster. This made the paddle wheel move faster. Gonzo heard Mad Dog start to call his name, but he stopped as he hit the water with a thud. Mad Dog tried to spit water at Gonzo as he came back to the top, but missed. Gonzo laughed as Mad Dog went back down into the water. As he came out and around, Mad Dog shook his head to get the water off his face and said nothing as he came around to the top. Gonzo gave him a wave as he came around, but Mad Dog didn't even look at him. He was looking down at the water. The next time he came out of the water, he let out a big whee! This surprised Gonzo, and he gave Mad Dog a good long stare as he arrived back at the top. Mad Dog gave Gonzo a wink as he headed back towards the water and screamed out, "Here we go!" "What the?" Gonzo yelled. As Mad Dog came out of the water and headed to the top, he yelled out as loud as he could, "Gonzo, you gotta try this!" He flew right by them and back into the water. Gonzo looked at the gang around him. "Is he enjoying that?" "Certainly looks like it," answered one of them. "It actually does kind of look fun." "Charlie!" Gonzo yelled as he stuck his cane in the air, signaling to the wheelhouse to stop the paddle wheel. As Mad Dog came to a stop at the top of the paddle wheel, looking out once again at Gonzo, he started shaking his head. Man, Gonzo, you gotta try that. Whew! What a blast! "There's plenty more paddles here, tough guys." Some of the gang looked at each other, almost like they were thinking about joining, but Gonzo spoke up. "I guess it's time to slow things down, then." He leaned over the rail, getting as close as he could to Mad Dog. "I'm done with you. Tell me where my treasure is, or else. This is goodbye." Mad Dog didn't respond. Gonzo raised his cane, brought it down slowly, pointing it towards Mad Dog. The giant crystal on the top of the cane reflected the light on Mad Dog's face as the paddle wheel started moving slowly, very, very slowly. "This is the slowest the paddle wheel will go," Gonzo said. "I want you to notice how long you will be underwater. And don't think for a moment that I won't hesitate in stopping it altogether." Mad Dog realized that each paddle probably stayed underwater for about 2 minutes. As his paddle got closer to the water, he started bargaining with Gonzo. "Okay, look, let's let bygones be bygones. Where is my treasure?" Gonzo responded. We both have done some pretty stupid things. Where's my treasure? Why don't we get a drink and just talk it over? So, where's my treasure? Gonzo could no longer see Mad Dog, but could hear in his voice that he was scared. He put his cane in the air to give the next signal. The crony in the wheelhouse door waited to see what Gonzo wanted him to do. "If I die," Mad Dog yelled out, "you'll never get it back." "Then you know where it is," Gonzo answered with a big smile on his face. There was a pause. Gonzo leaned over the rail to make sure he could hear him. "Okay, fine," Mad Dog yelled out. "I'll take you to it." "No! Tell me where my treasure is." "Gonzo, I don't think I can hold my breath that long." "Well, you're gonna find out real soon." Gonzo let out a laugh as Mad Dog entered the water. "Hey, Gonzo, what if he drowns?" one of the cronies standing next to Gonzo asked. Good riddance to him then," Gonzo answered with a laugh. But then how will you find your treasure?" Gonzo let out a snort of air through his nose. He knew the crony was right. He lifted his cane in the air and twirled it around. His crony in the wheelhouse gave a little power to the engines to make the wheel go a little faster. "I'll take care of him after I get my treasure," Gonzo said to the crony next to him. They watched over the rail for him to pop back up out of the water. As the paddle wheel Mad Dog was tied to came out of the water, the ropes were there, but there was no Mad Dog. Gonzo stood on the top floor of the steamboat, eyes red as fire, air snorting from his nose like a bull ready to charge. He threw his cane in the air, and the crony in the wheelhouse stopped the paddle wheel. "Search the boat!" Gonzo exclaimed. "He had better not get away, or heads will roll!" He spun around and watched the paddle wheel as it came to a stop. The paddle Mad Dog had been tied to stopped right in front of Gonzo. All that was left was the rope, which was still tangled around it. Gonzo looked closer at the paddle, and there, attached to the paddle by the rope, was a red ruby, part of his treasure. "Charlie!" he yelled. He slammed his cane on the deck of the steamboat. Gonzo slammed his cane down on the floor. He spun around from the window and walked towards his desk. There on his desk sat that same red ruby. It was a reminder to Gonzo of how close he had come to getting Mad Dog, how close he came to getting his treasure back, and how sneaky and dangerous Mad Dog was. In the casino of River's Edge Terrace, money was being deposited into the slot machines and exchanging hands at the tables. And sitting at the end of one of those card tables, playing hold'em, was the infamous Mad Dog. He was leaning back in his chair, puffing on a cigarette and exuding an aura of complete confidence. He looked around the casino as if he didn't care what anyone at the poker table was doing. He had his large bet in front of him and was just waiting for others to act. Fold, wait. The fresh-faced young man was holding up the bet. He was staring at his 2 cards, then at the cards dealt on the table, then up to the ceiling, then back to his cards, then to Mad Dog, then back to the cards on the table. He looked around at the others at the table. There was no help there. Then back at his cards. Mad Dog blew out a stream of smoke in the young man's direction. "Come on! You gonna do something or what?" Mad Dog exclaimed in his impatient tone. As he yelled this, he patted his right hand on the wooden table. A ring on his ring finger rapped against the wood, almost sounding like rapid-fire machine gun. This rattled the young man. "What you gonna do, mama's boy?" The dealer leaned over to Mad Dog and said in a very unemotional tone, "Sir, I'm going to need you to please control your outbursts." The young man looked at Mad Dog like a deer caught in headlights and tossed in his cards. The other players at the table snickered. The woman sitting to the right of Mad Dog looked at him and smiled. "Mad Dog, you think you can just intimidate anyone, don't you?" Sarge asked with a gravelly voice. "Sarge, I don't think I can. I know I can." Sarge laughed. "You might think you know, Mad Dog, young man, but let me tell you, you don't," Sarge said, clearing her gravelly voice and pointing to Mad Dog. "I've known Mad Dog for way too long. He can be intimidating, annoying, uncontrollable, mischievous, and impatient." Sarge looked at Mad Dog and smiled. "You are famous for your impatience." She looked back at the young man, still smiling. "His impatience can control a poker table, a gang, an army, or a whole town." Sarge lost her smile and looked back at Mad Dog. "But behind that impatience and all the other bad qualities is a genius. A man who can analyze a situation and find a solution faster than any man I've ever seen." "Gee, Sarge," Mad Dog said, "you're making me blush." But Sarge didn't hear him. She was lost in some memories of events from long ago. "His quick thinking and reactions have gotten him out of many sticky situations," she continued, "and helped remedy so many problems. Of course, he had help." Sarge and Mad Dog looked at each other and nodded. "Come on, Sarge," Mad Dog said, leaning towards her. "You gonna propose or you gonna call?" "No, I'm not gonna propose," Sarge answered. "I'd be afraid you'd say yes." The other players at the table laughed. Sarge shook herself out of the nostalgia. "I'm just thinking about days long gone and trying to find an answer to the biggest question of all." She leaned into Mad Dog. "Are you bluffing?" They both stared at each other. Sarge trying to read Mad Dog trying not to be read. Sarge smiled. "I think I'm going to save my money for another time," she quipped, throwing her cards in. "Smart move," Mad Dog said, reaching for his winning. Did you have it?" asked the young man. Everyone at the table looked at him in disbelief, then turned to Mad Dog. "Son," Mad Dog replied, putting a cigarette in his mouth, "I always have it." He gave the young man a smile, a wink, and then turned to the dealer. "Deal him up," he ordered, stacking his chips in front of him and starting to laugh. As he did, he nodded to Sarge, then he glanced around the room. It was always good to keep an eye out for anyone who might be hunting him. He was, after all, a wanted man. Captain Hobogon and his men moved slowly down the main street of Merchant Valley. A cold breeze blew right down the middle of the street, causing them to bundle up. The dull light bulbs on the buildings lit the street, which there was no one on. That was exactly how the good captain wanted it. Captain Hobogon looked up at the buildings, thinking back to the days when the lights on the buildings were so bright you would think it was daytime. It's been a while since they were that bright, and he missed it. Victor rode close to the horse where the limp body of the young man lay. He looked across to Captain Hobogon. "His body is cold," he said to the captain, "even though he has a blanket and that thick coat." The man started to stir a little bit. He struggled to raise his head. "Cold," the man said. He looked right at Victor. "Where am I?" Victor looked at the captain. "Well, we're just entering Merchant Valley," Captain Hobogon replied. The man's head dropped down. "I've never heard of Merchant Valley," the man said. How has he never heard of Merchant Valley? Victor asked Captain Hobogon. "He probably has a concussion, or he's blacked out drunk. Either way, he probably doesn't know what he's saying," Captain Hobogon answered. "We going to hide him at Queen Kwan's place, Captain?" Peter asked, riding up beside Captain Hobogon. "No, we're going to secure him there," Captain Hobogon corrected Peter. He looked over at the unconscious man. "Something not right here." He scratched the top of his head with his index finger. "Never in all my years. You know, Captain," Peter continued, "he does look kind of familiar to me." "He does?" Captain Hobogon asked him. "Yeah, but I just can't remember where." Captain Hobogon shook his head. "Well, I don't recognize him." He thought a moment. Then he called out, "Sarge!" "Sarge is off tonight," Tom said. "Oh, yeah, I forgot. Tom, could you go in and get Queen Kwan?" "Yes, Captain," Tom replied. He spurred his horse to make it go a little faster. When he got to Queen Kwan's store, he jumped off and went inside. "If we're lucky, Queen Kwan may know who he is," Victor said. "She does know just about everyone in the lands," Captain Hobogon replied. They came to a stop in front of a large store. Before they could dismount their horses, a short lady, all bundled up in a thick blue coat, walked out with Tom. Captain Hobogon dismounted his horse right in front of her. "Queen Kwan, thank you so much for letting us bring him here," Captain Hobogon said quietly to the lady. "No problem, Captain," she replied. "We are all finished closing up, so there is no one around. You know what I mean?" she whispered to him. Queen Kwan owned the largest store in Merchant Valley, and even some of the smaller ones. She was a petite lady. She looked around the captain at the lifeless body draped over the horse. "Is he alive?" "Yes," Captain Hobogon answered, "but I think we need to let him lie down and rest. He's really cold and has a nasty bump on his head. My extensive medical training leads me to think he probably has a concussion." Queen Kwan rolled her eyes. "You're okay with him staying here for a little while?" "Oh, absolutely," she replied with muffled excitement. "He can rest his cute little head in the back storeroom. I have a table all ready for him." "Thank you so much, Queen Kwan," the captain said. We'll try to stay out of your way." He turned around and quietly yelled, "Sarge!" "Sarge is off tonight," Victor and Peter said together. "Oh, right," Captain Hobogon said, and chuckled to himself. "Okay, well, let's have you two take the man to the storeroom." Peter and Victor removed the body from the horse and carried him into the store. Queen Kwan took a good long stare at him as they carried him by. She said. "I recognize that blanket as one that we sell here." "That's right. We use only the best," Captain Hobogon said with a smile. "But," she continued, not really reacting the way he expected her to, "I don't recognize that thick coat. Or the shirt. Was it white with thin red and blue stripes?" Yes, I think it was." "I don't recognize it. The stripes were too thin to be from Merchant Valley." Queen Kwan thought a moment. "But I want to say—" "What is it, Queen Kwan?" Captain Hobogon asked. He moved close to her. "If you recognize him or anything about what he is wearing, it could help." Queen Kwan was really trying to place the shirt. "He's wearing an old style of jeans, standard black work shoes, but that shirt and jacket, a thick brown jacket. I'm not familiar with any area in the lands with that style. At least what?" Captain Hobogon asked. He was interested in what she had to say. "At least, not these days." It's possible they're very old school. I may have to do some research. She looked at the captain. And did he look familiar to you? No, but Peter thought he looked familiar. It all seems strange. You know what I mean? He looks somewhat familiar. His clothing is strange, possibly old. What do you believe it means? I just don't know, Queen Kwan, Captain Hobogon answered. Well, hopefully he can share with us his cute little story when he wakes up, she said, returning to her happy, peppy self. Yeah, hopefully. Queen Kwan turned and walked into the store. Captain Hobogon looked up at the sliver of a moon. He removed an object from his pocket, being very careful that no one else would see it. He looked down at it and shook his head. He then looked down the lit street towards Town Square and saw the silhouette he knew well. It was a figure dressed in a dark robe and a hood over its head. It was standing at the top of the stairs that led to an abandoned train station. Its robe fluttered in the wind, and, even though Captain Hobogon could not see its eyes, he knew it was staring right at him. Seeing the figure told the captain that there was something more going on. He nodded towards the hooded figure, almost to say that he knew what was going on, although he didn't have a clue. He put the object back in his pocket and started to play with a ring on his right ring finger. What have you ancient ones done now? Captain Hobogon said under his breath. A gust of wind blew into Captain Hobogon's face, and the hooded figure was gone. He took a deep breath, scratched the top of his head with his index finger, then patted down his oily hair. Never in all my years, he whispered, shaking his head. He turned and entered Queen Kwan's store.
Thank you for visiting the land. We hope you come visit us again soon. Whew. Well, obviously, something is happening. I'm sure Captain Hobogon will get to the bottom of it with all his extensive training, don't you know? So, episode 6. In episode 6, we get to meet a few more subjects of the kingdom. We had already met King Michael and Queen Michelle, but now we get to meet Prince Sean, who is the son of King Michael. And we meet Kat, King Michael's trusted advisor, who he relies on for quite a lot. And then we got to meet Belle, who is Queen Michelle's fairy friend. In Merchant Valley, we meet Queen Kwan, the proprietor of the largest store in Merchant Valley. Expect to see a lot more of her in the future. And then we have our first sighting of the mysterious Ancient Ones. So, who are the Ancient Ones? I guess you better listen to find out. So in this episode, we focused a little more on the kingdom, which was kind of neglected in a few of the previous episodes. In fact, wasn't last time we heard from the kingdom, it was in episode 2. So one of the things I liked about this episode is it's the first time I kind of had scenes flow into one another. We have King Michael kind of mention, okay, what are you doing, Director Jakalian? Then we go to Director Jakalian, and then from his scene, we see the big white mountain, and then we follow the ferry to the castle, and that's we lead into Belle and Michelle, and then after that, we kind of flow up into Cat and Prince Sean. So there's kind of a little bit of a flow between scenes, which is something I enjoyed and hopefully will be able to do. It just so happens it's all worked out this way. In the scene with Prince Sean and Cat and that conversation, I unfortunately, cut out a bit of that, where Prince Sean asks Cat why he is friends or how he met his father, King Michael, and Cat goes into the story about how they met and why he works for King Michael. But some of the feedback I got was that it just made that scene too long, and so I ended up having to cut that. Hopefully, it will appear in a later episode. I also really enjoyed writing the scene between when Gonzo has Maddog on the steamboat. That was actually part of a previous scene that was in another episode that I cut away from and put in episode 6. But I like it because in a later episode, in another chapter, you'll see it from a different perspective. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find out how Maddog escaped. I guess you'll have to listen to keep listening and to find out how that is. I thank you for listening. But before we go, I have a message here from one Cat. And Cat says, greetings. King Michael has requested I inform you of the importance to push the like and subscribe buttons, and to turn on notifications if you would like to be informed of future opportunities to visit the lands. We do hope that you come back for a visit. There is much happening. You don't want to miss out. In service to the king, Cat. Thank you, Cat. As Cat says, please push the like button, push the subscribe button, leave comments, turn on notifications. We'd love for you to keep on visiting us because we're hoping that there is a lot more episodes to come. So keep listening. And for Pete's sakes, keep the spirit alive.